Good afternoon. This is Frank Katsakria giving you 5 minutes of the election here. We are 45 days out from the election, or as I like to put it, results night, because we start voting here in a couple weeks. Last day to register in Florida, either as an overseas ballot to get your overseas ballot or to register on the polls, is October 9th. That's Columbus Day. It's a Monday. And then what happens is overseas ballots go first, then regular absentees, and then depending on where you live, between 1 and 2 weeks of early voting, and then election results night is there November 6th. Now, I spoke a couple weeks back about how Miami was not doing the early voting on the college campuses. That's now changed. Again, the victor goes to spoils. Democrats now have a majority of the county commission, even though it is a nonpartisan technical race. And instead of just getting FIU, which has a residential component, they would have put it close to an area that would have been easier for commuter traffic. They've added Miami-Dade North, and I believe they've added Miami-Dade South. Miami-Dade North is a horrible spot to put early voting, not because it's going to get out minority votes and not because it's going to get out Democratic votes. They were already going to vote. It's a bad spot because now you are going to conflate the problems of early voting during the week. It's probably not going to move the needle on the number of people that vote. And there already were areas that were well qualified that had the early voting. My issue has always been not that there should not be early voting near college kids, it's that you don't want to put them by college campuses because it screws up the traffic for college, and it also makes it harder for regular voters to vote. So unless you are souls to the polls on Sunday, where you're going to vote anyways, and it's well organized, and quite frankly, it's been one of the successes of getting minority votes. If you are not in that crowd, you might be frustrated with trying to vote at the North Campus. But this is election season. I'm going to give you here it is a little over 6 weeks out. We always have the silly time in a campaign, the oh come on time, and the serious time. And I'm going to give you an example of one on each. So on the silly time, it's our Senate race. It's Bill Nelson, who's been there since Moby Dick was a minnow, and Governor Rick Scott. And it's silly time because right now the ads are sort of a little bit silly. They're a little bit more, they've gone back to introductory ads, which somewhat happens. Rick Scott has pumped up the Spanish ads, which are important. I don't know what Bill Nelson is thinking with his lack of Spanish ads. And again, he has a money disadvantage because even though the Democrats on a national level through PACs have spent enough to catch up with Rick Scott is a true billionaire who is willing to open up that wallet, and the candidate, not the political PACs, are guaranteed the lowest possible rate whenever they buy a TV ad, radio ad, internet ad, and he's loading up on them. And you could have a split decision between governor and senator. That's because we are in the oh come on season when it comes to governor. It's oh come on season because we've had like the 5th or 6th case where one of Ron DeSantis's donors just said something really stupid and or tweeted really something stupid, and it's like, come on, man, you gotta get your donors in check. Now on the Democratic side, Andrew Gillum, he's not doing much better because he's stuck in this FBI probe thing that's hanging over him, and he's trying to say that he doesn't have to post receipts from part of these monies that he spent. And it's really hard to say that in the one hand you want to have an FBI investigation on Brett Kavanaugh, and that'll be in a different video, and yet when you have your ongoing investigation that you actually are a part of, you don't want to release your data. So it's kind of like come on. So on one hand you have the narrative is you have a racist versus a crook, socialist crook, and we'll see what wins there. Now, on the serious side, it's the South Florida 3. And that comes from the fact that there are 3 Republican congressional seats. One is being retired by Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, That one's serious because there was a poll out there that says Donna Shalala is losing it by 7 points. And this should be a slam dunk. Democrats, Hillary Clinton won the seat or won the district by 16 points. No incumbent, Democratic majority, registration, and yet the Democrats again chose a candidate who does not speak Spanish, who Mark Caputo, who's a reporter for Politico, basically said it seems like her campaign's on autopilot, and that may be calling it nicely. Now, the Democrats do have an internal that says that she's up by 4, but it was done September 1st, which is right after the election, right after the honeymoon period. That should have been. And there's nothing wrong with internal polls as long as they're done correctly. You can have a really shitty paid poll that's just crappy, like an online poll. You can have a really good one that just happens to be ran by a political organization. Triple P on the Democrats and Rasmussen for the Republicans. They tend to do pretty good jobs, even though they are usually paid for by a political candidate or have a conservative or liberal slant in who they want to support. Actually do a pretty good job on it. On the other two serious ones would be in 26. Now that's the one where Carlos Curbelo is the current congressman. He's running against Deborah Marsala Cursalo. I don't know. Even the pronunciations between her name and her DCCC ad is different. She's in sort of serious time because she came out earlier with attacks about Carlos with accepting money from somebody who had some legal problems. And it turns out she accepted a lot of money from somebody who got some legal problems. And so far, she doesn't want to give it back. And that's becoming a campaign ad. And normally that would be silly time. But this is real close when you've kind of made Carlos as being this Republican puppet, which is really hard when the candidate didn't even endorse Donald Trump ever and didn't vote for Donald Trump in the presidency. It's kind of serious that you've made this allegation and now you're kind of eating shit. Now, in the case that I've always thought was the hardest, was surprisingly would be hard, is Mario Diaz-Balart seat. And Mario was struggling. Last poll had him, he's still up, but the race is narrowing. And he's never really ran a hard campaign. Remember, he switched into the seat to avoid a potential downfall. So he ran it into his brother's seat when he was already serving a different seat. He's not the greatest campaigner. We'll see if he can hold out. Now, he's got 6.5 weeks. We'll see what happens. On that governor's race again, it's the first time that one of the polls did have Gillum up outside the margin of error, but when you looked at the likely voter, it was still within the margin of error. That race should tighten, but there's a really good shot that it could be Scott and Gillum. It's just a matter of, does Scott pull DeSantis across the line, or does Gillum push Nelson across the line? We'll see. This is 5 Minutes of Frank on Florida politics, and we'll see you next time. Like and subscribe.